You're about to hear a great program, and you're going to stay warm for an hour and a half. Two really good things to happen on a day like this. But welcome to a symposium on fracking. Fracking, the quest for energy independence. My name is John Anderson. I'm the president of Illinois Institute of Technology, and I'm a member of the board of the Chicago Council on Science and Technology. This symposium is sponsored by C2ST, as we call it, and I'm pleased to see so many members of our board directors here, starting with Al Schriesheim, if you could stand, who is the president of the organization, Paul Knappenberger, board member, Bob Arthur, Jay Walsh, and Art Shaw. So Art's okay. Hiding back there, okay. The Chicago Council on Science and Technology seeks to be a preeminent regional consortium for science and technology-related education and policy, and a prominent voice nationally. We aim to bring to public the issues of importance to society that involve science, engineering, and technology. It's a membership-based organization. The dues are very reasonable, and I encourage people here who are not members to join. I think you'd find it very worthwhile. Also, we have evaluation cards at each position, I believe, and ask that you fill those cards out. It helps us in defining the agenda for programs down the road. Today we're going to hear about hydraulic fracturing of rock. Fracking, as it's called, has been used for many years, actually, to open up rock to allow higher permeability for oil wells and even drinking wells, water wells. Right? We're talking today, though, specifically about recovering natural gas from porous shale. Natural gas, methane, is the component in natural gas, which is of most interest to us. And it's a molecule we use for heating at home and cooking, of course, but it's one of the cleanest carbon-based fuels you can have. The products of its combustion are carbon dioxide and water. It can be purified, so there's less contamination, and it produces about 1/2 the amount of CO2 per energy unit that petroleum-based fuels do. So it has some advantages. We've also found in the United States great reservoirs of natural gas, so it also offers a possibility of some energy independence or less dependence on other countries for energy. However, with any benefits, there are always costs and risks, and we have to weigh the benefits against the risks. It's difficult sometimes to get it out of the ground, and there are some issues that have to be addressed. As an engineer, as a chemical engineer, I've learned that everything has risks. The key is to manage those risks in a way that's responsible and that the benefit is great enough to pursue the opportunity. Today we have 3 speakers, and they will each give you a brief presentation, and that'll be followed by a question and answer period. I'd like them to come up as I call their name. Jerry Holder. There's that. Jerry is the Dean of Engineering at University of Pittsburgh and Professor of Chemical Engineering at that university. He received his bachelor's degree from Kalamazoo College and then his PhD in chemical engineering from the University of Michigan. He served on the faculties of Columbia University and then the University of Pittsburgh since 1979. He has been Dean of Engineering at the University of Pittsburgh since 1996. He also had brief employment periods with Exxon, Gulf Oil, and General Motors. To prove how circular the world is, we've just found out, Jerry found out that Dr. Al Schriesheim was his boss for a couple weeks when he was at Exxon. But I don't think they connected at all at that particular point, because Al Schriesheim was way up here and Jerry was way down here. So Dr. Holder is the author of more than 100 journal articles and served on many national panels directed at issues of carbon-based energy sources. His research has been in high-pressure thermodynamics and phase behavior, and in various aspects of energy research, including synthetic fuels and natural gas hydrates. The second speaker is Jordan Ciezobka. Jordan is a completion engineer for the Gas Technology Institute, which is headquartered in Des Plaines, Illinois. This means he actually does fracking, so he knows quite a bit about it. Mr. Ciezobka joined the Gas Technology Institute in 2010 and is engaged in well completion research across various U.S. sites. He holds a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from Purdue University. He began his career as a field engineer for Halliburton Services in South Texas in their pressure pumping services. His current focus at GTI is on the Marcellus Gas Shale research project, mainly in Pennsylvania. You will hear more about that, with emphasis on hydraulic fracturing, diagnostics, and the impact of natural fractures on gas production. In the meantime, he is also an active member of GTI's international technical activities. His most recent international project included the execution and optimization of a complex hydraulic simulation treatment in the Oman tight sands in Oman, in the Middle East. Our third speaker is Trevor Smith. Trevor? Trevor is program manager for Unconventional Gas Sustainability at the Gas Technology Institute as well. He holds an international MBA from the University of South Carolina and Wirtschaftsuniversität Vienna, and a Bachelor of Urban Planning and Development and Science from Ball State University. Trevor identifies and develops opportunities for businesses, organizations, and governments to collaborate with GTI. He is active in global unconventional gas development with an objective of increasing both the economic and environmental sustainability of natural gas development from shale. One focuses on produced water management. He led an international joint industry project of 19 companies completed in May 2011, which assessed the technologies and the economics of shale gas water management over the life cycle of resource development. It's a pleasure to have all three gentlemen here, and we'll start with Dr. Holder.
John, you want
to? Okay. This might work too if you wanted to use it.
I'll use this.
Yes, see if it works.
Does this work? Okay, that's great.
You want that?
Yeah, that's great. Hello, it really is an honor to be here at the council and talking about a subject I think which is of very significant national importance. I wanted to thank the council and everyone for inviting me here, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this. If you look at if you're wondering what this building is, some of you may know what it is, but this is the main university building at the University of Pittsburgh. It was sort of built as a monument to education, and it's occupied by many of the departments, but it's a spectacular building. If you ever get a chance to look at it, please do. But I wanted to put this whole shale gas issue into context and to talk about its impact on the energy picture in the world, which is can be significant. You know, the energy challenges that exist for us today there's a tremendous growth in demand for energy in the world. Energy is to economy like food is to survival of the human being. You need the energy to run the economy, and without it, you'll have a significant reduction in economic output. At the same time, because of many of the issues which you're familiar with, there's pressures to reduce consumption through energy efficiency and other means. There's calls for more reliable and friendly solutions for generating energy, and there's going to be tremendous strides made in reducing the energy consumption in various entities through green buildings and electrical production efficiencies and transportation efficiencies. And there'll be new energy sources developed, such as wind power and solar power. So there's a lot of challenges, and the gas from shale is going to be one of the solutions to the challenges that exist. This just shows the energy consumption throughout the world, and you can see that fossil fuels, that's coal, gas, and oil, will continue to be the dominant source of energy for the next 30 to 100 years. And these are the productions that the federal government has put out of what the consumption will be. And this is after all of the efficiencies that are generated are taken into account. So it's not what will happen if we don't do anything. This is what will happen if we really focus on developing optimal energy use. And you can see where the demand is coming. China and India are resulting in big increases. The rest of the world is going to demand more and more energy, and so it's a very important factor of why shale gas is important. And if you look, one of the U.S. energy targets is to reduce carbon emissions by 83%. So if you recall what John said, when you burn methane as opposed to coal or oil, you have a dramatic reduction in the carbon emissions, because as a fuel, methane has much less carbon per unit of energy than the other two. So that is why there's a desire, when you're going to use fossil fuels, is to use natural gas in preference to the others. Now, there's other factors that make things desirable, like convenience of using natural gas in cars is not that great right now because of many issues, and the cost of coal is much less than other fuels. But the goal that's set by 2050 is 83% reduction. So this is a Marcellus Shale exploration and drilling site, just showing you some of the issues. You can look at this, the impact of the site itself, the presence of trucks, the water issues. All of these will be discussed during the presentations this afternoon. Here's where shale gas is. These are called shale gas plays. You can see there are many across the United States, but the most significant that's contributing today is the Marcellus Shale, which is basically, the way I describe it, is centered in Pennsylvania and extending around to the surrounding states, but it's a large site. And underneath the Marcellus Shale is something called the Utica Shale, which has not been developed at all as of yet. And you can see this is Ohio-Pennsylvania border, and you can see the Marcellus Shale. It's thicker as you get more into Pennsylvania and thinner, but more shallow as you go towards Ohio. And this is what's being developed for natural gas, particularly in Pennsylvania. And you can see the depth, the various depth, how the depth changes. The depth of the Marcellus Shale base is 2,000 to 3,000 feet on the northern side, and then as you go south, it gets deeper and deeper up to about 9,000 feet. And one of the reasons this is significant is because the aquifers that are associated with the shale, and which have been of concern, are usually at dramatically different depths. And I think you'll hear a little bit more about that. And then the thickness, and of course, the thicker it is, the better it is in terms of trying to drill and find the maximum amount of gas per unit surface area. And you can see the thickness goes from about 40 feet to about 720 feet, with the majority of it being over here around 500 feet. And it gets thicker as you go in this direction, thinner as you go north. So we're going to hear about the specific technology of production of gas from Marcellus Shale. So I'm going to not go into a lot of detail, but I'll give an overview of what's going on. Basically, it's a site where wells are drilled down into the shale, and then you have to fracture the shale in order to get the gas to come out, which means you turn it from impermeable rock into permeable rock by hydraulic fracturing. And you then gas will flow back up, and it'll be produced like a gas is in any natural gas well. The fracturing, this is a sample of the fracturing where you inject sand and water, and you develop these fissures along the, if this is the well, develop these fissures that project away from the well, and then the gas will flow along those fissures back out. And that's the technology. That's a sort of a very, very quick overview of that particular technology. And so why is this important? The main reason why Marcellus shale gas is so important is because, not only because methane is an environmentally friendly gas, I mean a fuel compared to others, but that it's a huge amount of gas. It's 490 trillion cubic feet is estimated. That's a 21-year supply of the U.S. demand. So it's a huge potential, has a huge potential to meet the needs of Pennsylvania, which is can become the second largest gas producing state in the nation behind Texas. Now I think it's about 15th. So it has a chance for that, but also because it will impact the price of energy, it'll lower the price of energy, and it will impact the economy in the regions where the gas is produced. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. Here you can see the permitted wells in Pennsylvania. So what I say, there's a lot of discussion about should we be permitting wells or should we not, but the truth is there's thousands of wells permitted. They're producing lots of gas from this, and a lot of people are employed because of the Marcellus shale gas. And as I mentioned, the Utica Shale, which is another shale play underneath the Marcellus Shale, is even bigger and potentially contains more gas. And so if this is produced, it could have an even bigger impact than Marcellus Shale, but we'll have to stay tuned to see what the Utica Shale is and what happens there. I think by the time they get to Utica Shale, some of the issues associated with this hydrofracking and disposal of water and so forth will have been addressed. What are the water issues? We'll hear about that. The water issues are that you need 3 to 7 million gallons of water for hydrofracking. So that's a lot of water. You withdrawing water from the surface, so you're consuming water from a river or stream. The water contains a lot of additives when you inject it, and it contains even more minerals and things when it's produced. So it's an environmental issue, and you have to learn how to deal with that problems that's associated with the environment. You have to transport the water. So it requires trucks and movement of trucks across roads in the region of the wells. And you have to water storage issues on site. How do you store water on site? Because you need millions of gallons. You have to have a way of storing it, and you have to protect that environment around there and restore the environment once you're finished. And then water disposal. At some point in the Marcellus shale cycle of hydrofracking and drilling, you have to worry about what you're going to do with the residual water, and that's a disposal issue. So I'm not going to talk about all of these, just to mention that's one of the things that's affecting Marcellus shale. I just want to talk, I just have one slide that addresses one of these issues just for illustrative purposes. You can see there's 6 billion gallons per day of water are used for power generation in Pennsylvania. And the estimated amount of water that would be used for producing 3,000 wells per year, which is more than we produce, are being used right now, is about 60 million gallons. So you can see it's, in terms of overall water usage, it's a small amount of water, but it's concentrated in certain regions. So even though this ratio is 100 to 1, it's not an insignificant issue. So what is the economic impact? This is from a Penn State study that was looked at the economic impact of Marcellus Shale, that for one well, you'll have 400 people obtain jobs from many different occupations on average. That the local economic impact is that in Pennsylvania, it'll create 100,000 jobs and $8.2 billion of additional revenues in 2010, increasing to up to about 174,000 jobs and $13.5 billion in revenue in 2012. And it's estimated that if the maximum production potential of this is maintained, and that will depend upon the price of natural gas, that it will have an impact of about 250,000 jobs and $20 billion. And of course, that's just the Pennsylvania impact. The national impact will be much larger, potentially millions of jobs and hundreds of billions of dollars contributed to the economy. And these figures include what we call the downstream jobs. So the jobs that are created by the fact that a farmer is getting $20,000 a month of royalties for the gas that's on his property, and he might be hiring someone to buy a new tractor or hire someone to work on his farm rebuild the barn or whatever. There's these standard models that use multiples of these impacts to create the total effect. And they're, again, estimates because it's not completely certain what will happen down the road. Here are some other factors which are talk about the economic impact. Up to 7 trillion cubic feet annually will be produced from 3,000 wells, plus wells. These are maximum numbers. It'll generate about 1 to 3 billion in state and local taxes annually. I don't know about in Illinois what's happened, but I know in Pennsylvania that the governor's very concerned about the budget, and he cut the University of Pittsburgh's budget by 24%, something like that, last year. And if the taxes from these revenues had come in, we wouldn't have had to do that. So it could have these additional state taxes do address many of the needs of the state. There's lower gas prices. Natural gas, for some of you are familiar with this number, but is selling for about $2.50 per 1,000 cubic feet. And that translates into an oil price of about $15 a barrel. So it's very inexpensive, and it's being driven, the price of the gas is being driven down by the availability of more gas than we can presently consume efficiently. And as a consequence, the price is going down. Now, that has some residual benefits for the consumers, and it's estimated that energy costs in Pennsylvania are $600 million less because of the lower price of natural gas. And this is actually probably a lower estimate because all of these models were done assuming that gas was about $5 per 1,000 cubic feet. So the price of all kinds of energy are lower because of this. And it affects actually the whole country and the whole region ultimately, because I don't know, many of you, if you got gas bills for heating your homes and stuff, you're probably noticing that the cost is much less than it has been in the past. That is to a significant extent impacted by the availability of the shale gas. One other comment I would make about that, it's my expectation, and I'm not an economist, but I know a little bit about economics, is right now with oil selling for $100 a barrel and natural gas selling for equivalent of about $15 per barrel, that's on an equivalent energy cost, that those figures have to come together because people are going to start using natural gas for more and more things. So you would expect that the price of oil would decline a little bit. I don't know how much, and the price of gas would increase because as you switch to more uses for gas, the demand for gas will go up and it will drive the price up. So the simple economics tell you that these two disparate figures have to converge. Historically, the price of gas and the price of oil have been gone in lockstep. It's only really since the Marcellus shale gas has come online and other shale gas that the price of oil and the price of gas have diverged. Where the price of oil has continued to go up in the last 5 years, the price of natural gas has declined. And the other economic impact, the last one that I'll mention, is that there's billions of dollars of royalty and bonus payments to landowners. As I mentioned, the farmers, people who own land, they get royalty. Typical gas royalty is 12.5% of the value of the gas that's produced. In Pennsylvania, they're paying higher royalties, and if you're in Pennsylvania, you talk to people that are benefiting from this. So you can talk to your neighbors or people you know, or at an event like this, if you talk to a few people, there've been some people that are making money on this. It's had a big economic impact. And I was talking to one person who had some acreage that was sort of sitting fallow. He didn't know what he was doing with it. He just bought it as an investment long before he knew anything about Marcellus shale gas. And he's now getting $20,000 a month in income from the use of this gas. So it's a lot of money to a lot of people. And it's having a big impact, and it's very important to the state. So that's my overview. And thank you, and I guess we'll go to our next speaker. Jordan is going to speak next, and then we'll have questions later. Jordan.
Thank you. First, I want to thank the Chicago Council on Science and Technology for having me here. I'm most honored, and the audience as well for taking your time out of your busy schedule to come here and listen to us. Dr. Holder gave a very good overview about what the impacts of shale gas development are on both, the local economy as well as the energy consumption across the U.S. What I'm going to focus on a little more is what actually goes down in the earth and what's this technology about hydraulic fracturing all about, and why we need it to get the gas out of these gas-rich shales. My name is Gerald Ciezobka. I work for the Gas Technology Institute, and let me go into this presentation. Just to give you a brief overview of what a gas shale is, when you think of oil and gas reservoirs, for example, like in Saudi Arabia or the Gulf of Mexico, think of these very nice sands, like you would think of beach sand. If you pour the water on a beach sand, the water would just flow right through the sand. These shales are just the opposite. These shales are extremely, extremely tight, meaning that they have very little permeability and very little porosity. So when you think of a shale, think more of like concrete on a sidewalk. When you pour water on it, the water just flows. It doesn't absorb into the concrete. So, and the shales that I mentioned, the beach or the reservoirs that I mentioned, the beach sand reservoirs, which which are the Saudi reservoirs or the Gulf of Mexico, are these right here. And these reservoirs are really they're really drying up really fast. There isn't very much what's called easy oil and easy gas. So there's a need now to extract gas from these gas-rich shales. All the hydrocarbons that you find in these nice, clean sand reservoirs, they're all generated in these gas-rich shales. And because the porosity in these gas-rich shales is so low, you actually have to expose a lot more of the rock to the wellbore in order to produce the gas or the oil or whatever hydrocarbon in economic quantities, whereas these other conventional reservoirs are much easier to produce. And finding the biggest difference between the gas-rich shale and the conventional reservoir is that it is a source of the hydrocarbon. It's the reservoir that is holding the hydrocarbon, and also it's a trap. So you have all three, phases that occur in a shale. Okay. So like I mentioned earlier, the shale is more like concrete. Here's a sample on the bottom. of a black shale. It's an organic rich black shale. The scale is about 5 centimeters. So from the surface, it looks like there's nothing there. It looks like you couldn't pour anything. When you zoom in to about a scale of about 100 microns, you start seeing there are little discontinuities in the shale. You start seeing different minerals and different things happening. And when you zoom into this little fine hairline crack there, on a scale of about 2 microns, you can actually see that, in fact, this shale does have porosity. It does have some fine hair-like fractures, and this is where actually the hydrocarbons are contained. Again, it's not very much pore space to house the hydrocarbons. That's why so much shale has to be exposed, and that's why hydraulic fracturing is needed to break apart the shale and create more of these fissures and fractures to let the shale out of these pore spaces that have little or no conductivity. In addition to being a very tight rock, there are 2 different flow mechanisms in a shale that allow the hydrocarbons to flow out. Methane is stored in shales in 2 ways. One, it's encased in the porosity, and 2, because this organic rich shale has organic matter, the methane molecules are actually absorbed to the organic matter of the shale. And the only way to get that to get the methane that's absorbed to the organic matter from the shale to flow out is you have to reduce the pressure. So once you desorb the methane from the organic material, it goes into the porosity, and then it goes into these fractures that you created through hydraulic fracturing, and into the wellbore. But there has to be some kind of synthetic permeability that's created in order for these things to flow. And this is where hydraulic fracturing comes in. And hydraulic fracturing is based on creating permeability. Creating permeability in these reservoirs is not really new. It's actually been around for a very long time. In the 60s, the government and industry experimented with nuclear detonation to create permeability. They would actually convey a nuclear bomb of some smaller scale, detonate the bomb, and see if there's any hydrocarbons that were trapped in the rock that would come out. Well, it didn't work. The rock was destroyed, it created glass, and in the end, you had to deal with radioactive material. In the 80s, these massive hydraulic sublimation treatments were thought to be the ideal way to go about releasing the gas from the rock. And in the real world, it turned out that these massive treatments didn't really extend out as far into the rock as we thought. Instead, what happened is that a lot of these little smaller fractures were created, and it didn't stimulate the reservoir, the hydrocarbons very effectively. And this is where horizontal wells and hydraulic fracturing are making a difference now, and for the last 10 years, actually. So what you have is a horizontal well in the formation that contains the hydrocarbon, and you fracture stimulate this horizontal well a few times, and you break the rock apart, hence you get gas out of the rock that normally wouldn't flow gas. Here's a quick timeline on hydraulic fracturing. This technology is actually fairly old. It's been around since the 1940s. The first one was in the Hugoton field. And the volumes were really small back then. I mean, around 1,000 gallons of fluid. As it evolved in the 50s, 60s, by 1965, there were 400 treatments executed. By 1975, there were about half a million, and so on. This is where, in early 2000s, with the development of the Barnett Shale in the Fort Worth, Dallas area, this is where the horizontal wells with multi-stage hydraulic fracturing really took off, and the volume of the fracturing treatments really increased. And nowadays we have over 1 million wells that have been fracture stimulated. And if you think about it, each well sometimes can have up to 20 or 30 fracture treatments. So there have been plenty of hydraulic fracture treatments that have been already executed. So again, the point is that this technology is not new. It's been around for a long time, but it's been evolving over the years to make it what it is now. The hydraulic fracturing fluids that were used initially was kerosene and diesel fluids, then progressed to napalm, fatty acids, and caustic. And it wasn't until the crossing gels came out about 1970 where the hydraulic fracturing is what it is now. The reason for the crossing gels, you take a base fluid like water, you add a gelling agent that viscosifies the fluid, and then you're able to put in a propping agent. This propping agent is what actually keeps these microfractures that you create, it keeps them open. So once you pump the hydraulic fracture, you put something in there like a sand or a synthetic material, and then once the well begins to produce gas, the fractures that you created now close on the propping agent and stay open. And as fracturing evolved, the fluids became cleaner, more refined, more fit for purpose, and the fluids nowadays used for fracturing in these shales are really, really green. And what I mean by green is that most of the additives that are put into these fracturing fluids are contained in all the household products that you can think of. So how does the industry protect the water aquifers and the water tables from any kind of contamination, whether it's from the fracturing fluids or the methane or things like that? I'm going to give a brief, overview of what a oil and gas well looks like. So what you see here is a freshwater aquifer. Then you have the water table. You have some salt water below that, and you have the geologic formations that contain oil and gas, and so on. So initially, what is drilled is called a surface casing, and the casing is and the hole is drilled right below the water table. Once the hole is drilled, a steel casing is placed inside of the hole and is cemented all the way around the annular space from the bottom of the casing is at to the surface. This way, every zone that contains water is isolated from the zone above it or below it, so you don't have any migration of any in situ fluids. Then another hole is drilled that's a little deeper, that goes all the way down to your gas bearing zone. And again, steel casing is inserted, it's cemented, and it isolates any kind of geologic formations from communicating with each other. And if you extend this out, there should be this is also a horizontal well. I just showed it for simplicity to be a vertical. So how does fracturing work? We put in fluid. The fracture is made. Once the fracture is made, we flow the water that we put in back out, and then once the water flows back out, the hydrocarbons flow. Very quick example of how this is done. Here is a horizontal wellbore with, let's say, the geologic formation above and below. Here's the hydraulic fracture that was made, the initial fracture. What happens is a mechanical plug is pumped down. The plug is the plug isolates this set of fractures from the next one. A perforating gun is also conveyed in the hole. The perforating gun is made up of shaped charges, which are explosives. You fire the explosives, it makes a hole in the casing. You may want to shoot another round. And now that you've created these holes in the casing that give you communication from the wellbore to the formation, a second hydraulic fracture treatment is pumped, and then so on and so on. And then again, it's plugged back, another round is fired, and so you can actually have sequential stages, 1, 2, 3, 20 fracture stages in a single horizontal wellbore. And how big are the holes? The wellbore could be, the actual casing could be 4.5 inch, 5 inch. It's not very big. So I made this animation to kind of try to visualize what these hydraulic fractures are doing relative to what else is going on in the formation. So what you see here is a plan view looking from the top on 2 horizontal wellbores that are parallel. These brown and green lines are natural fractures that are already in the rock. For the most part, every rock has some kind of a natural fracture in there that's been created through tectonic movements and changes in stress. So as we pump these hydraulic fractures, let's say in this first wellbore up here, the fluid goes out of these perforations that I just showed you. These hydraulic fractures connect up with the natural fractures, and now you have this network of, I guess for lack of a better word, shattered rock, where the rock previously was a solid piece that nothing would flow through it. And then this is a little bit more advanced concept in fracturing, but there's also a way where you can actually optimize these treatments if you do what's called a zipper frac. So if you frac the first well bore, you induce these hydraulic fractures. There's actually a stress field that changes, and then when you fracture the second well, the fractures that are generated should not come in contact with these first fractures, and therefore you should get pretty good coverage of the rock and stimulate the entire rock mass that you're trying to extract the hydrocarbons from.
How far apart would those be?
500 feet, 1,000 feet. Let me give you a little bit of background on the current project that I'm working on in the Marcellus Shale. We have what's called a 7-well pad, and all these wells, we have 7 horizontal wells that are drilled, of course, side by side, and these wells are drilled from a single pad. So the pad is no bigger than maybe, I don't know, an acre of land, I guess, once it's all said and done. But, so the wells are drilled from a central location. The spacing in these wells is about 500 feet apart. This is a plan view, of course. The depth of these wells is about 6,500 feet, and you can see the length of the laterals, with this one being about 4,500 feet to about 3,500 feet. So these wells actually go out really far laterally. It's pretty amazing that they're able to drill a lateral well that far out. What's, I guess, more important about this is the setting of where these wells are at. This is actual, to scale, a plan view of the wells overlaid on top of the local, I guess, the local setting. What you see, this is in a rural, very populated area. I don't have a size, but it's actually a little bit hilly, and it's very important that the environment and the people and the quality of life is taken into account when developing these wells in an area like this. So it made a lot of sense to drill these wells from a central location to limit the amount of land that's being used and things like that. So that's what it looks like. And this is actually what the surface looks like. Again, what you see are the well heads. Each one of these is actually a gas well, and there's 7 of them here. So the other option, if you didn't drill these wells at a central pad, would be to drill each well on a separate pad. And I mean, you would have to build a huge pad to get the drilling rig in there, the water pits and all that. So this actually saves a lot of land and a lot of changes to the environment. So you might ask yourself, how does the industry know where these hydraulic fractures go? I mean, because we can't see underground. It's some of these wells are 3 miles deep in the earth. There's actually a way to monitor which direction and how far these hydraulic fractures go, and it's done with microseismic imaging. Every time you crack a rock, or even when you drop a rock from your hand to the earth, you actually generate a earthquake. Granted, it's a very, very fine earthquake that you can't feel, but there are instruments that are called geophones or accelerometers that can actually detect these very fine earthquakes. And the industry uses those in 2 ways. One, they set up a surface array with these very fine instruments, and as a crack is generated 2 miles under the earth, you can actually, these instruments can pick up a tiny signal. The other way is to put these geophones in a well bore, like here. So as you're fracking the other wells, there's actually a listening device in this well bore that picks up where these fractures are going and what's going on. Here's the example of the surface array, and on this project that we're working on right now, actually both have been implemented to actually, get a good feel of where these fractures are going. Again, here are the 7 wells that I showed you earlier. Here's the array of the surface geophones that extends out from the center of this pad. The array includes over 1,000 accelerometers that are put into the ground that listen for these micro earthquakes to see where this hydraulic fracture goes. Okay. And again, here is the end result. Each one of these dots is a micro earthquake that shows you where the fracture is going. If I may just take one more minute, I have a movie that I want to show that kind of shows this in real time. Like Dr. Holder mentioned, these shales are all over the states. They're at different depths in different basins. The Haynesville is one of the deepest ones. The shale is actually between 10.5 and 13,000 feet. There's a New Albany shale here in southern Illinois that's fairly shallow, about 2,500 feet. So the shale is everywhere, and there's a lot of gas there. Okay. Okay, so here's the 7-well pad, or the 7 wells, and what you see are the hydraulic fractures propagating from this well. So this well right here is being fractured. As the well is being fractured, microseismic events are being generated from the cracking of the rocks, and there are listening devices in this well right here that are picking this up. As you can see, as the well is being fractured, more and more events are being picked up. And this is actually the permeability that's being created. It's a shattering of this rock that releases the hydrocarbons and provides a path for the hydrocarbons to flow to the wellbore. And when you speed this up a little bit, you'll see more and more of the rock space being stimulated. Pause right there. So you can actually see how high these fractures propagate. This depth here is 6,500 feet. Here's about 6,000 feet. Here's about 7,000 feet. So these events don't go higher than 500 feet above where they're intended to be. Here's the general coverage. And one point I want to make before I give it to I hand it over to Trevor. What you see here is that all these wells were fracture stimulated. However, in this area, you see very good coverage of microseismic events, meaning that this area was stimulated really well. Here you see a void. And this is actually where a lot of research is needed to understand why some hydraulic fracture treatments are effective and why some aren't. Because if the treatment isn't effective, then you're actually leaving a lot of gas behind in these unstimulated areas here. So that's actually what we're working on right now, is trying to understand how this works and how to optimize it, how to optimize these fracturing treatments to better utilize the rock that's there and not have to go back in the future and redo it. Thank you very much.
All right, yeah, so good afternoon, and my name is Trevor Smith. I'm the Program Manager for Unconventional Gas Sustainability at the Gas Technology Institute. I want to thank the Chicago Council for Science and Technology for inviting me to speak today. It's a pleasure to be here. I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to share my perspective on shale gas environmental impact and sustainability issues. For those of you who may not be familiar with GTI, we're based in Des Plaines. We were a spin-out of the Illinois Institute of Technology over 40 years ago. We have about 250 staff. 80% of the staff are scientists and engineers. I am not. I'm a business guy. And we are the only not-for-profit research and technology development organization that is entirely dedicated to natural gas. And what I want to talk about today are the environmental concerns, both real and perceived. I want to talk about why I think these concerns exist and what's being done to minimize the environmental impact through continuous improvement in new technology. So GTI is a 70-year-old organization. We've been working with producers and service companies and technology providers in unconventional gas development for 30 years. And as you can see in this slide, GTI led the early research and development programs in coal bed methane and shale gas in the US from the late 70s to the early 1990s. These were very sizable programs totaling about $170 million. These programs led to the scientific and technological innovation that is utilized by the industry today to make these resources economically producible. And I think this slide is relevant to what we're talking about today because although the technology for unconventional gas development has been developing for over 30 years, the public and stakeholder communities, they've only been introduced to this technology very recently. And so what I think is critically important now, if these resources are going to reach their full potential, is the societal acceptance of the technology and the sustainable development of these resources going forward. But of course, society's reaction to these resources so far have been mixed, to put it lightly. Not everyone's very happy about the development and the increase in shale gas production. There have been numerous objections raised by Oscar-nominated movies such as Gasland, New York Times feature articles on hydraulic fracturing, and local protests from high-profile people like actors like Mark Ruffalo. But as we heard Jordan and Dr. Holder talk about, hydraulic fracturing has been applied for over 60 years, and there have been over 1 million hydraulic fractured wells. The industry knows that they can develop these resources responsibly and safely. They know the technologies are proven. They know that unconventional gas has and will continue to provide economic and environmental benefits. But to those outside of the industry, these technologies appear new, they appear novel, untested, and some would say even dangerous. And so a harsh spotlight has been shined on the industry's operating practices. And the industry has been slow to respond with the appropriate information and transparency that I believe provides the needed environmental assurances. And I think it's because of the perceptions of environmental impact and because the technologies have been very disruptive to the energy market, particularly to the further development of renewable energies, that opposition groups have organized campaigns against it. There's been a lot of emotional rhetoric and accusations generated about the technologies used to develop unconventional gas. And this has resulted in a lot of confusion, and people just don't know what to believe, and they don't know who to trust. They don't want to trust the government, and they don't want to trust the industry. In my view, what's enabled this lack of information, what enabled the confusion was the lack of information when it was desperately needed very early on in the process. There was a significant increase in drilling activity closer and closer to where people live and work. And yet, information was not made available about the science behind the technology. Worse still, the industry chose to downplay concerns and to dismiss the concerns of the public. And I think what they should have done is engaged in more authentic listening to understand what the concerns were and to come forward with information that would have been helpful. But in the absence of good, credible information, people are going to make up their own minds. And now that people have made up their minds, some people have made up their minds, it's really hard to go back and change their opinions after the fact. It would have been much better to enroll these people up front in what unconventional gas technologies make possible. And this cartoon is a good representation of what's called the ladder of inference. This is where groups of people draw their own conclusions based on their own self-interest, and also based on the information that they have in front of them. And instead of talking rationally with other groups and aligning around a common set of facts, they instead climb up their own ladders of inference and start shouting their conclusions and judgments at everybody else, hoping to convince them that their positions are right. And I really think this is what we're dealing with right now when it comes to hydraulic fracturing and unconventional gas, not only here in the United States, but in Europe and other parts of the world. People just aren't sitting down and looking at a common set of facts and drawing conclusions, and I think that's what needs to take place. I think it's as much about the science of human behavior as it is about the science of unconventional gas technology. So while scientific and technological innovations will continue to play a key role in unconventional gas development, and the economics and the energy security issues are important, I believe it's going to be the environmental issues, both real and perceived, and the acceptance by the general public that will determine the extent of which unconventional gas resources will reach their full potential. Now, hydraulic fracturing and water management are obviously at the core of environmental debate, but it's not just about hydraulic fracturing. There are a number of environmental impacts that the public sees, that include land use, air emissions, induced seismicity, waste disposal, traffic, road damage, noise, wildlife. And the industry faces what I call an image deficit. People associate natural gas with big oil. And so presenting facts, presenting the facts matter, but I don't think it's enough. It's also about addressing the perception of the industry. And this is what the public sees. They see lots of trucks, they see an industrial process, and they see a lot of water. And then they don't see what happens underground, and so people's imaginations run wild about what might be happening that they can't see. And so I want to talk a little bit about the water requirements. Average wells require approximately 3 to 5 million gallons per well in the Barnett and the Marcellus. Just to give you a point of reference, 4 million gallons of water is about 6 Olympic swimming pools of water. So we're talking about a lot of water, but it's also important to put that in context. 4 million gallons of water is approximately 1.8 inches of rain over 80 acres. And Pennsylvania is a state that's water rich. They get about 40 inches of rain per year. And I have some friends at Consol Energy in Pennsylvania, and they've helped me put the water usage in other contexts. They tell me that New York City, for example, uses 4 million gallons of water in approximately 4 minutes. A 1,000 megawatt coal-fired generation station uses 4 million gallons of water in about 12 hours. A golf course might use 4 million gallons of water in approximately 25 days. And while these represent continuing consumption of water, the water used for gas wells is really a one-time event. Now, what people don't see is what's going on below ground, and this is the source of some real fear. And I think this is why it's important to separate the facts from the fiction. This slide, which I borrowed from the American Oil and Gas Reporter, shows the facts. A company called Pinnacle used microseismic technology. Jordan just shows you an example of microseismic technology to listen to the rocks as the fractures are created. And what they did is they mapped these fractures with reasonable accuracy. And what you see here is a series of hydraulic fractures over a length of distance. And here you can see the distances measured between the freshwater aquifer, which in this case in Pennsylvania is located at depths less than 1,000 feet, and the induced permeability that's created by hydraulic fracturing at depths between 5,000 and 9,000 feet. And this slide also shows the height of the fractures. It shows how unlikely, not impossible, but how unlikely it is that hydraulic fracturing technology itself is a threat to potable groundwater supplies. What should be the focus, I think, the focus of the scrutiny, should be less about hydraulic fracturing technology, and it should be that the wells are constructed with integrity and that the water is handled properly at the surface. All operators should follow proper well construction standards so that fluids do not find their way from a poorly cemented well into a shallow source of drinking water. Another environmental impact receiving attention right now is methane emissions during natural gas exploration and production activities. Natural gas is a relatively clean fuel that contributes significantly less greenhouse gas emissions per unit of electricity produced than coal. However, recent published reports by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and Cornell University brought this benefit for gas into question when they indicated that upstream methane emissions are increasing due to well drilling, testing, and completion procedures. Because methane is much more potent greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide, methane that leaks or is purposely vented into the atmosphere is more harmful than the carbon dioxide that is produced when methane is flared on site or burned in its use. However, reviews of these reports by GTI and MIT and Carnegie Mellon have all identified flaws in the EPA and Cornell reports. In fact, even Cornell University came out this week and concluded that the greenhouse gas footprint of shale gas is much lower than that of coal. The Carnegie Mellon study focused specifically on the Marcellus Shale and found that the shale gas is much cleaner than coal by 20 to 50%, depending on the plant efficiencies and natural gas emissions. And this matches the comparison shown here as provided by the American Gas Association. It's noteworthy to recognize that the Carnegie Mellon study was reviewed prior to publication by the Sierra Club. And most recently, there are questions about earthquakes, possibly tied to hydraulic fracturing or deep wastewater injection wells. And I'd be happy to talk more about this in the Q&A rather than spend time here. It's a scientific debate that's ongoing right now. And I think I'd like to highlight real quickly another very important environmental issue, and that's the drilling footprint. People see the consumption of land for drilling, and this is an example of gas farming operations in Wyoming. And with images like this, you can understand why people in more densely populated areas like Pennsylvania and in places in Europe, that they might be alarmed. Here in West Virginia, people see a Marcellus shale well site located on a mountaintop. Here is a well site located literally in a farmer's backyard in Arkansas. People see lots of trucks, they see road damage, and they see construction debris. But I'd also like to show you a number of mitigation approaches that are increasing the economic and environmental sustainability of shale gas development. Okay. Reducing footprint is a focus of operators, and there's an economic incentive for operators to get more gas with less footprint, more revenue, and less cost. An example is the use of multiple wells off a single pad and other steps that allow us to farm these resources and get more of the resource at the surface. The progress has really been amazing. From only being able to access about 502 acres of energy resources per well in 1970 to being able to access over 32,000 acres of energy resources per well pad today. And what's really exciting is we're still only getting about, anywhere from 10 to 30% of the gas out of these wells. So with advances in technology, we should be able to get a greater percentage of the gas out of the ground and extend the life of our natural gas supplies. Here's a representation of how multiple wells are drilled from one pad. This is what it looks like at the surface after drilling. Multiple wellheads located on a single pad. This well pad might be about 1/4 of an acre in size. Greater use of pad drilling with more and more wells on a single pad allows us to move from the example on the right, where we might have 20-acre spacing between well pads, to something more like the left, where we would get 160 acres spacing between well pads. Right now, with existing technology, as I said, we're only getting 10 to 30% of the gas out of the ground. And over time, we might be able to extend the supply of the gas produced and minimize the environmental footprint even further. The vision is to try to mimic nature as much as possible, using something like a tree root drilling system to extract gas in much the same way that tree roots extract water from the ground, where multiple lateral wells and multiple fingers of wells are drilled from a single hole in the ground. I don't have time to go into much depth of this, but another best practice of the industry is to try to reuse as much of their water as possible. And there's a number of benefits to reusing water. And finally, there is a recognized need for further research about hydraulic fracturing. This just gives you an example of some of the continued research. We understand that about 50% of the hydraulic fracture treatments perform as expected. And so if you can double the effectiveness of the hydraulic fractures, you effectively minimize the environmental footprint, getting more gas with less of a footprint. And as I said, facts alone may not be enough. It takes a combination of many things. And I'll just close with this slide. These are a number of examples of work that GTI is involved in to help increase the economic and environmental sustainability of these resources. So thank you.
All right, we can now open the session for questions. And does someone have a first question? Dimitri?
I have a question. How do you estimate the production rates of this shale gas? Because if they're correct, there's going to be the energy picture is going to change in Europe because the production rates are so huge. Are you using any kind of models like Darcy Law or more advanced models? Because we do have a two-phase flow problem. And as you know, the BP underestimated the oil spill into the Gulf by at least an order of magnitude. Even now, there's a question of what kind of models to use. We do have the two-phase flow models, so I'm just wondering, well, first of all, how do you estimate? Is it just a guess that these production numbers, or are they based on some permeability estimates and Darcy Law?
Could you repeat the question, or the essence of the question?
Yeah, sure. The question was, how do we estimate natural gas production from these shale reservoirs? Well, In general, and you hit this right on the head, these reservoirs are really complex. You have a lot of different things that are going on. They're very heterogeneous. There are different flow mechanisms. Of course, one is diffusion, then there's Darcy flow to go to the wellbore. So they're very complex reservoirs. In terms of estimating what these wells will produce over their life, it's still, the shale gas development is pretty new. So it's pretty, I mean, there are models that you can predict based on what the reservoir pressure is, what the total organic content is, what the porosity is. You know, you may be able to estimate what the gas in place is, but in order to evaluate how much of the gas you're going to be able to get out, you really won't know. So what's being done right now, it's more of a empirical way to predict how much a well will make, and that's only once you have a certain amount of production. Let's say if your well is producing for a year or 2 years, now you actually have some physical hard data where you know what the production curve is. And you know, different scientists, for example, like at Stanford, they're working on models, bimodal decline models that take into account different reservoir properties to predict what this well will make in, let's say, 20 years. Is the well going to produce 5 BCF, 2 BCF? So it's not, because this is so new, there isn't really a true tried and tested technique to predict. Rather, hard data is needed to more effectively and more accurately predict what these wells will make.
I just add one more point. The estimates that you see, typically, the organizations that do it, they look at all the parameters that are associated with producing quality gas, things from pore pressure to the maturity of the gas to the thickness of the shale and other things. And they estimate it on ideal conditions, and then they get an estimate based on what they would expect to see. And then they apply risk models to reduce those estimates to the point. And so, you know, every shale is different, and so there's different risk models to determine how much production might be expected from a resource. But at the end of the day, they're just projections. It's not until the operators actually get in there and drill and see the gas and see what's being produced that those models can either be verified or have to be adjusted.
Okay.
Dr. Holder, you mentioned 21 years for Marcellus available.
Yes.
Natural gas. Does that mean in 10 years, there may be 11 years left? What would happen with the prices?
Okay, well, that's a good
Would you repeat, Jerry, would you repeat the question?
Oh, the question, I had pointed out that the reserves of gas could be equivalent to 21 years of supply for the nation. And the question was that in 10 years, will that mean we have 11 years left? And then what would that do to the price? So what I would say is that number is just is not a set in stone number. It's more of a number that shows you the magnitude of the gas supply, not something that's actually producible. But and then so I don't, and it's nonlinear. I think the comment on these, a lot of these wells that you drill are depleted much more rapidly than conventional gas wells. So their lifetimes are shorter, and they have to be re-stimulated, or other wells have to be drilled. And I think the comment was that about 10% of the calculated gas in place is producible. So they don't, a lot of it is remaining there. So there's technology for producing that. But as far as the supply and demand is, when you know, you could sort of look at the history of the price of natural gas and oil, and you know, the concerns about depletion of oil and the availability. The reason the price of natural gas is low right now is because there's a lot more natural gas than there were expected to have, and the consumption of gas can't be. You can't consume all the gas being produced very effectively because you don't have natural gas powered cars. They're not building power plants as fast. The other alternative sources where you could use natural gas aren't, the infrastructure isn't there, so consequently you're still using other fuels like oil or coal. But as you know, if you're building something that's going to consume energy and you think I'm going to use oil or I'm going to use coal, and you can get gas for $15 and oil for $100, you know, a lot of businessmen won't take a long time to figure out which one they want. And then if you look at the environmental impact, it's better. So that's going to drive the price up. So even if more gas is available, until you get to the point where there's enough gas to replace all the oil and coal that is being used in the U.S., which I don't think we'll ever get to, you're not going to see the price of gas operate independently of those over a long period of time. Over a short period of time, like we're experiencing now, I think yes, but over a long period of time, history tells you that these BTU values will track each other, and the preferred, if you think of gas as being, natural gas being preferable to oil and coal, oil being preferable to coal, and coal being the third fossil fuel of choice, then you're gonna burn those, and gas can't be more expensive, less expensive than coal, and people still choose coal in the long run. In the long run.
Let's go right over here on the corner. Now, you, right?
Thank you. The statement that methane is 50% cleaner than other sources, I think that's comparing carbon footprint to carbon footprint.
Yes.
Yet the other sources give off oxides of nitrogen and sulfides and other compounds. And so the 50% figure might be an understatement of the attractiveness of using methane. Is that true or not?
I think most people would agree to that. You know, the issues with coal has a lot of minerals in it and ash products and so forth. Coal is things that you don't want. Coal is a lot cheaper than other fossil fuels, and it's an abundant supply in the U.S. And it's been so people are looking around. If I'm going to operate a plant for 20 years to produce electricity? Am I going to run out of oil? Am I going to run out of natural gas? Are those prices, historically, those prices have risen more dramatically than coal. And so coal has been a choice. And it's, it's the choice. In China's, I don't know if this is still true, but 2 years ago, they were saying they're building a 1,000 megawatt coal-fired power plant every 2 weeks. And they were building coal-fired power plants, one, because they could do it faster because they had the coal was available. It's a lot cheaper than any other fuel, but it's certainly at the same BTU value, and if you were confident of a long-range supply, then you're not going to choose coal. You're going to choose natural gas. That's my opinion. You have to go into the boardrooms of a coal company to know if that's true or not.
Way in the back.
So the presentation was terrific. Thanks for all three of you. Very informative. So Dr. Holder, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, but just to play this out, when you talked about the economic advantages of natural gas, part of that was pitched to the idea that it's $2.50 per unit. But as the prices converge, those economic advantages are going to minimize. Do I understand that correctly?
No. The people producing the gas want the price to stay high. And the people working there, if you're working for a Dominion gas, you want the price of gas to be high because then you are making more money. If you own oil, you want the price of oil to be high. And
the consumer, though, where you said there'd be a $600 million savings for
right.
Pennsylvania consumers.
Right.
So that's going to diminish as the prices of the fuels converge, right?
Yes.
But
you might trade off the price of gas for the price of gasoline. So gasoline is $4 now, and gas is $2.50. If gas went to $20 and replaced a lot of the oil needs, then you might see the gasoline drop in tandem.
Right. So do the three of you see this as a bridge? Right now, we're comparing one fossil fuel to another, and unless folks think that there's an inexhaustible supply of fossil fuels, or that it's in our best interest to burn fossil fuels as long as possible, my question is, do you see this as a bridge from more carbon-intensive, more polluting fuels to connect to less or non-polluting fuels? I'm interested in the reflection of all three of you.
See, I don't know. The problems of energy in the world and in this country are profound. I mean, they're not. It's very difficult, in my opinion, to predict what is happening in the future. There are lots of issues. We thought we had a nuclear solution 3 or 4 years ago, and then what happened in Japan has put a halt to a lot of the plans. Germany decided that they're not going to build nuclear plants anymore. They have one of the more conservative approaches. The I think the demand for nuclear power as replacement to fossil fuels has changed. So if you had a rating of the environmental impact of all fuels, natural gas would be somewhere in the middle. So it can be a bridge to other alternatives. Things like wind have their problems. You know, wind energy, you have to use it when the wind's blowing, and if you got storage problems and you have grid problems with wind because you can't, if you're producing a lot of electricity that nobody wants, what's going to happen to it? You know, with a plant, at least you can operate it when you need to. So I don't know. I don't know if that's the answer to your question. I'm just saying it's a complex solution. I don't know if you guys have any comments.
I would just maybe say that, you know, if these environmental issues can be addressed, I think natural gas has the potential anyway of being more of a destination fuel for the foreseeable future rather than a bridge to something else. I personally hope renewables find their niche and be competitive economically, but I think at the end of the day, the economics are going to win. And I think if we take our climate change challenge seriously, I think natural gas gives us the cheapest, our best hope of achieving those objectives in the near term rather than the long term.
I'll make a statement that cause an argument. There's no such thing as a non-polluting fuel. Even solar and wind are polluting in some sense if you look at life cycle and what they can do to the environment. Another question. Let me get over here. Okay.
Is the cost competitive relative to conventional gas extraction or unconventional gas extraction? You know, will the industry, from a pricing standpoint, be able to make as much money as they can drilling conventional wells?
The question was if the cost of developing unconventional gas is competitive to developing more conventional gas where a hydraulic fracturing will not be needed. And well, so it's, of course, this is actually happening right now with gas being $2.50. Even though the wells that are being drilled right now, whether it's Marcellus or Haynesville, economically they're still profitable. They'll pay for themselves in a few years, let's say, depending on how good the well is. Some operators are moving away from dry gas wells where it's purely methane to wells that contain more of the gas liquids, ethane, butane, propane, because those liquids are a lot more valuable than just the methane. And as gas prices stay depressed, you may see a lot more of that. If the wells are good, they're profitable. Meaning, what I say by good is if they produce a lot of methane, even at 250, the wells are still profitable. But you know, there's still some transition that's going on from these purity, you know, just pure methane wells to more of liquids-rich wells.
What's the break even roughly that, you know, you have in your mind in terms of the cost per million cubic feet that makes a fracking process, you know, economically feasible?
The question was, what is the break-even price for a well to become economical? It varies across the whole U.S. There is a chart out there that kind of shows you what the break-even price is, depending on the depth of the well. I mean, the deeper you go, your drilling costs and completion costs increase really, really fast. So, I mean, 250 may be economical in a Marcellus, but if you go to the Haynesville, you may be losing money. So it just varies where you're at.
It's not a male-dominated sport, so I'm trying to
Since we talked about money, how do you foresee the cost of the cleanup process?
What is the cost of the cleanup process?
Yeah, I mean, there are some side effects that there are effects coming out of this process. How do you foresee cleaning up, and what is the cost of the cleanup?
Yeah. Based on a project that we just completed last year, we did a techno-economic assessment of water management solutions, and we determined that probably the single biggest cost factor for unconventional gas construction and completion and operation is the management of waste streams such as brines and solid waste. And we estimated that in a typical county in Pennsylvania, those costs might be between $10 and $80 million, per county. And if you look over the life cycle of development, over say like a 45-year development period, we estimated that anywhere from 6 to 10% of the total value of the gas could be consumed in the management of waters and other waste streams. That may be true. I think the closest evidence of that might be the Quadrilla incident in the UK. But there's a distinction between the deep injection of waste streams and hydraulic fracturing. Deep injection of the waste is much deeper, and they're pumping tremendous amounts of wastewater for a continuous period of time until they can't pump anymore. And it's likely that over time that those fluids could find their way into fault lines and create some slippage. Hydraulic fracturing, on the other hand, tends to occur in shallower areas, and it's under controlled pressures. So operators, they don't have an incentive to overpressure a hydraulic fracture treatment. So once they fracture their rock, they're going to stop and move on to the next stage. And it's only for a short amount of time. So I can't say that hydraulic fracturing doesn't cause earthquakes, but I would say that deep injection of wastewater, the body of evidence is starting to build that needs some more study.
I'd like to thank our speakers. And I would like to thank the audience. This is the beginning of a discussion. The whole point of this is to get people to talk about these things and with a little bit of background. And if you have questions, I'm sure, I know Dr. Holder has to leave. Maybe the other two panelists would stay. And if you have a question next week, you know how to contact them. You can send them an email. Maybe they'll answer your question for you. Also, join C2ST. It's a great organization run by a great person here. And please fill out your evaluation cards as well. Thank you.